It has been the perfect winter weather here lately. It hasn't been too cold, it hasn't been too warm. We've had some beautiful snowy days and I am just in full winter mode right now. I've been spending a lot of time in the kitchen and really enjoying spending time at home and being home and preparing good food for my family. And so this week I wanted to bring you into my home and share some of the meals that I've been preparing for my family. I'm not going to show you absolutely everything that we ate this week because this would be a very long, repetitious video if I did so. We do eat a lot of leftovers in our home. So a lot of the meals that I'm making in today's video, we actually ate a few times because I make a lot of it and then we can eat leftovers. Regardless, I am taking you into my kitchen this week and sharing with you some of the scratch-made meals, breakfast, lunches that I made for my family. We're starting this video off with some enchiladas. I had a bunch of chicken from the week before in the fridge that needed to be eaten and I didn't know how to use it. And then I saw Lisa from Farmhouse on Boone make enchiladas with leftover chicken and I thought that's brilliant. I want to make that. And so I started off with some tortillas. I have not yet mastered sourdough tortillas yet, so this is not a sourdough recipe, but it's my go-to, it's my favorite. It's really easy and really fast. While the dough was resting, I got started on my enchilada sauce. I am someone who's really bad at following a recipe in the kitchen, especially when I'm cooking. If I'm baking, I will follow a recipe to a T, but if I'm cooking, it's really for me just by taste, by feel. So I very loosely followed an enchilada sauce recipe, but I mostly just kind of made it up. It's basically just some olive oil and some flour to thicken the sauce, a bunch of spices. I really just did this by taste, and then I added some tomato paste and some homemade bone broth that I had canned a few weeks prior. And then I tasted it and just added to taste. I definitely added some sugar to this to balance out some of the spice as well as the acidity from the tomato. While the sauce was thickening, I chopped up the chicken that I had in the fridge, and then I just poured the sauce over top of that. I did reserve some of the sauce to sprinkle over the enchiladas at the end, but that's all for the filling. I kept it very simple. Coming back to my tortilla dough, I actually made a double recipe of this, and this is something I do in the kitchen a lot. Like if I'm in the kitchen making something, I almost always make a double batch of it because I will use it later on in the week, or I can freeze it and use it sometime when I'm in a pinch. It doesn't take me all that much more effort in the moment, and then I have extra for myself later when I need it. Homemade tortillas is definitely time consuming and it's a labor of love, but it is something that I do really enjoy making for my family, and I especially love knowing all the ingredients that are in our tortillas. To assemble the enchiladas, I put some of the filling on a tortilla, sprinkled some cheese on, wrapped it up, and placed it in a baking dish. I did this until I ran out of filling, and then I just poured a little bit of the leftover enchilada sauce on top, sprinkled some more cheese. I got it in the oven for like 10 minutes just until the cheese melted. Everything got a little bit crispy and yummy. This was such a hit in our family. This is the first time I'd ever made these, and my family could not get enough of them. Like each and every single member of my family really enjoyed these. And that's a rare occurrence for everyone to really be excited about something, so I'm definitely making those again. Now, the week prior, I had tried a new sourdough burger bun recipe, and it was such a hit with the family that they specifically requested I make the buns again, but this time for breakfast sandwiches. So I wanted to make that happen for my family this week. Again, I'm making a double batch. This is actually how I grew up baking. This is how my mom taught me to bake because I was part of a bigger family. We had 6 members in our family growing up. and I learned how to make big batches of things, and so it's almost just second nature for me to always double a recipe. Buns are a fantastic thing to have in the freezer, especially for Sundays when I don't really feel like cooking. I made the dough earlier in the morning and got them rising throughout the day. Zach recently fixed the pilot light in my oven, and so now I can actually use that as a warm space to put my sourdough, but I do need to watch it carefully because it gets really warm in there. Sometimes a little too warm, but this is a really nice spot to let my dough rise. Once I got that going, I moved on to some lunch, and so I'm using the leftover tortillas that I had made the day before for lunch today. I realized I had some frozen chicken and some frozen diced peppers and onions in the freezer, and so I pulled those out, I shredded some cheese, and I just got some quesadillas going. This was such a beautiful way that I could use up scraps that were in my freezer, but also serve my family a really delicious scratch-made lunch. Again, this is how I was raised to cook, is just using what I have in the house and creating something from it. And then I realized I had lime, I had avocado, and I had cilantro in my household at that time. So I decided to whip up a quick dipping sauce. This is one of my family's favorite things to have with Mexican type food. I don't have a recipe for it. I just add some sour cream, some lime juice, lime zest, salt, pepper, a little bit of honey, and I just mix it all up and continue adding flavors until it tastes really good. It doesn't take a lot more effort, but it really elevates whatever we're eating. And so a simple meal of quesadillas, freezer quesadillas, became really delicious because I was able to just put a little bit more love and attention into the dipping sauce. At least once a week, I am in the kitchen all day, just making random things, and I don't plan this, it just kind of happens. But this week, I really wanted to try my hand at making some bacon jam. This is something I've been wanting to do for a really long time, but I just hadn't quite gotten there. So this week, I made it a goal to make bacon jam. I also made it my goal this week to make some pickles, which you're gonna see in a minute, but first I got that bacon cooking so that I could make the jam later on. As I was dicing up the onions for the bacon jam, that's when I realized, hey, I need to make pickles. Because I'm in the kitchen right now, it just makes sense to make pickles now. So whenever I'm in the kitchen, I'm usually making a number of things at one time, and I find that this is what saves me the most time, is if I'm doing something in the kitchen, just do something else. I've already got the kitchen dirty, I've got these dishes dirty, I'm already kind of like in the mode. I've got the oven warm, you know, like it just makes sense. This pickle recipe is a very quick and simple fridge pickle recipe. This is actually my grandma's recipe. I got it from her. These are so good and these taste like my childhood. I love these. I actually have this recipe on my blog and I can link that down below. But it's very simple. It's just a matter of chopping up like dill, onion, cucumbers, getting that all in a jar and then making a brine. This is also a great recipe to have kids help you with because it is so simple and easy for them to do. Once the brine is made, I pour it over top of the cucumbers. I'll pop the lids on and then I let these sit for 24 hours on the counter and then I transfer them to the fridge, and these will last for months in the fridge. Once those were finished, I moved on to the bacon jam. This is one of those things that I was just really intimidated by. It is something I've been wanting to make for a long time. Finally, I did, and I don't know why it took me so long because it's really quite simple, and I can leave this recipe down below. But it's really just a matter of like sauteing onions and garlic and then adding your liquids. Like this recipe called for some syrup, some coffee, some apple cider vinegar, and then adding the chopped bacon and letting it simmer. That's it. Like, it was really, really easy. So as that was simmering, I was getting supper going. I had a bunch of red peppers in the fridge that I needed to use up, but my family isn't a big fan of peppers, and so I was trying to figure out how to use these. I thought I'm gonna try making like a roasted red pepper sauce for some pasta. So I got some peppers, some onions, some garlic on a pan. I actually drizzled bacon fat over them. I got some salt and pepper on them and then popped those in the oven. I also made some very simple chicken on the side with just some olive oil, salt, pepper, and rosemary. Again, pop that into the oven, keeping it really simple. And then I stumbled across this recipe the other day. This is a pea salad recipe that I have been making for about a year now. It's one of mine and Zach's most favorites, but I usually only make it in summer. It just has that summer flavor. And I really just wanted a taste of summer in the middle of winter, so I went ahead and made this pea salad on the side. It's one of those recipes that I can kind of whip up whenever because it uses frozen peas, and I almost always have peas frozen in the freezer. And then it calls for a bunch of other staples that we generally have, like some cashews, some feta, some fresh herbs, some Caesar dressing, lemon. It's kind of an odd flavor profile, but somehow it just works really well together. For the roasted red pepper sauce, I put all the roasted veggies into a jar. I added some liquid to it. So for the liquid, I did some reserved pasta water, a little bit of homemade bone broth. I think I also did some salt and pepper, and then I just gave it a good blend, and then I tasted it. And from there, I added ingredients until it tasted good. Whenever I make a sauce like this or a soup, I always add 3 flavor components. I always make sure there's a salty component, a sweet component, and an acidic component. It doesn't matter what you're making, as long as you have those 3 components in it, it's gonna taste amazing. So as far as flavors went, I'm pretty sure I added some maple syrup. I added some cream because I wanted it to be creamier. I did more salt, more pepper, and then the acidity was kind of already in like the peppers and the roasted veggies, and this came together beautifully. By the time the evening rolled around, my bun dough was ready to be shaped into buns. Buns and bread is one of those things that for such a long time I was so intimidated by. My mom did make a lot of homemade buns growing up, but I never really learned how to do it. And so it's something that for a long time, it just kind of scared me a little bit. But once I started doing it, and the more I started doing it, the more I realized this is actually so therapeutic. Like, this is a lovely way for me to spend a late evening. It's just shaping buns and forming them, pouring labor and love into something for my family. Now in the second rise, it is crucial to use a damp towel to cover your buns, otherwise the buns will form a crust and they won't rise properly. So I put a damp towel on these buns, let them rise in a warm place, and then before I bake them, I just brush them with an egg wash. I just whip together a little bit of water with an egg, brush that on, and then for half of these, I also sprinkled on top some sesame seeds. The other half I just left plain. But then I went ahead and baked these, and we enjoyed these the next day for breakfast sandwiches. I just realized I never actually finished the bacon jam on camera. Basically, I just let it simmer for an hour or two, and then once it got kind of thick and syrupy, I blended it loosely with my immersion blender just to get it a little bit more like a jam texture, and that was it. So for these breakfast sandwiches, I spread the buns with butter and got those toasted. I poached some eggs, and then I went ahead and spread that bacon jam on the buns. I got some cheese sprinkled on there. The poached egg still had a runny yolk, which was a lovely component to these. And then I also added some avocado on top. If we had greens, I would have added this as well. Sprouts, like alfalfa sprouts, would be delicious on this. But this was such a good way to start the day. It was very good. For supper that day, I made a simple shepherd's pie, and I don't have a recipe for this, I just kind of made it up. Growing up, whenever my mom made shepherd's pie, she made each component separate. So we would have the ground beef, and I think we had gravy, and then there was mashed potatoes and veggies. And I think she made it this way because that's how my dad requested it. He preferred things separate instead of all together. That's what my idea of shepherd's pie is. This is actually the first time I've ever made shepherd's pie normally. I didn't use a recipe either, I just kind of made it up, but it turned out really, really good. I started out by chopping up the potatoes for the mashed potatoes, and then I had some leftover onions in the fridge from the day before when I was making bacon jam. So I went ahead and chopped those up, added them to the ground beef with some garlic. Then I also added in some frozen corn, some frozen peas, got that cooking for a little while. I added some seasonings, so for seasonings I think I just did oregano, salt and pepper, and then I did some flour and got that all coated so that it would thicken the gravy. So once the flour was fully coating the ground beef, I started adding the liquid ingredients. And so I did some tomato paste, some Worcestershire sauce, some bone broth, and then just added ingredients until it tasted yummy. I got this in the bottom of the pan and got started on my mashed potatoes. Whenever I make mashed potatoes, I love doing a ton of butter, a ton of cream, and then to elevate the flavor, I really enjoy doing sour cream and dried chives. This just gives it such a beautiful, tangy, sour cream and onion flavor. It's really good. I didn't realize quite how simple shepherd's pie was to make, and I was a little bit surprised by how quickly I was able to whip this up. Just for fun, I did a little design on top and got that into the oven for like 10 minutes or so, or until the potatoes started getting a little bit crispy. I just plated it up and we ate it just like that, and it was really, really yummy. It was a really warm meal to have on a winter day. Now for the last meal, we are making homemade beet borscht and dinner rolls. This day, all the kids were starting to get a little bit sick. We were coming down with some colds. It was cold and snowy, and so this just felt like the perfect meal to have on a day like that. I actually had some beets left over from summer that I wanted to use up. So I started by just dicing up some onion, crushing some garlic, and preparing the veggies for the soup. I do not have a recipe for this. When I make soup, I make it up. It's always just from my head. This is the way that I learned how to make soup, and it always turns out really well. Like I said earlier, I just always make sure that there's a savory component, an acidic component, and a sweet component. So as the onion and the garlic were sauteing, I shredded up the carrots and the beets. The kids have been showing such an interest in helping me in the kitchen lately, and it's been so much fun having them by my side, teaching them how to do these things. Like, they chopped all the potatoes for this soup on their own, completely on their own. And it's really cool seeing all the time and effort that I've put into teaching them come full circle and to see the fruit of that. Once the onion and garlic had sauteed for a little while, I got the carrots and beets in there, and then I started adding some flavors and liquids to the soup. So I did salt and pepper, a little bit of tomato paste, and sugar. Then I added the rest of the bone broth that I had canned, and I think I had to add a little bit of store-bought stuff as well. Once all of that was boiling, I added the potatoes and sauerkraut. I think traditionally you're supposed to do just cabbage but I really like doing sauerkraut because it already has kind of that acidic taste to it, so then I don't have to add quite as much vinegar to it later. While that was cooking and the flavors were marinating, I got started on my dinner rolls. And again, this is not a sourdough recipe, this is a quick rise recipe, and it is my favorite to use when I'm in a pinch. I have made this recipe so many times and it has never failed me. It is such a foolproof recipe. This is from my Half-Baked Harvest cookbook, which I can also leave linked down below. But yeah, this recipe is my go-to when I need something quick. You can have fun with this recipe too. I've done garlic in the dough before and then topped it with some garlic butter, but I just kept it simple today. Then I realized I had a leftover chicken breast from when we had pasta earlier this week, which was perfect for the soup to add that protein to it. I also added some chopped fresh dill and some vinegar, and again just kept adding flavors till it tasted really yummy. When I pulled the dinner rolls out, I spread some melted butter on top and I let those rest and cool down for just a minute before we dove in and ate. This meal just hit the spot. It hit the nail on the head. We really enjoy topping our borscht off with some sour cream, some fresh dill. This tasted and smelled like Grandma's house. It was very nostalgic and very delicious. That concludes today's video. I had so much fun filming and putting this video together for you. If you enjoy videos like this, I would be more than happy to bring more of them to you. Let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.